Hello and welcome to Leviathan News. Today is November 21st, almost at the end of the year, and we are very lucky to have Millie here today, who is the now celebrity founder of TrueMarkets,
Indeed.
one
That
of the
was
cool.
quick. That escalated quickly. Isn't that how they say?
Thank you.
Look, all the information and foundation was there, right? Everything was laid bare, right? And so TrueMarkets is a decentralized prediction market that enables users to forecast the outcomes of real world events. And its special sauce is how it allows for disputes to be resolved. And that's really where it comes into play. And it's not just a prediction market at the end of the day. It's more about finding the truth and the best way to do that on chain. And so, Millie, thanks for being here today. And congratulations on selling out your patron NFT sale.
Thank you for having me. And that was a great breakdown of TrueMarkets and what our objectives are.
Yeah. So, really, it is, we said celebrity because one of the kind of more surprising things about the patron NFT sale is that Vitalik himself came and bought a full validator, 32 ETH worth of the NFTs, which is not really like a thing that happens that often. I don't think Vitalik has. I can't remember the last time that he's aped into something or publicly invested like that.
I've never seen it, and just like I told you guys, before we went on stream, I was sure that okay, maybe the guys had all kinds of talks and negotiations about it before and in advance. But Millie, you're telling us that it's not at all the case.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was as shocked as you guys. Like, I realized when I also woke up and just saw the tweets and the sales sold out. So yeah, there was no discussion with Vitalik and I. We have some interactions on the Twitter timeline, but aside from that, there was really no.
Wow.
Well, there is one bit of lore here because when I initially announced our project, well, at least the white paper for the Oracle, which was sort of like the foundational piece of our project, it was a day like I was just like drafting. I was finalizing our white paper really, and I was just preparing to I should announce this tomorrow or when should I announce it? Thinking about that. And then all of a sudden, I saw like Vitalik replied to one of my posts. It was about AI. It was posts about how like crypto can really leverage AI in the short term better than like any industry, I think. And so Vitalik actually replied to that, and he had given some examples of how we could leverage it right away, AI right away. And like it was just incredible to me because that was literally the white paper I was working on. I was like sort of like for that exact purpose, right? Those exact purposes that he was sort of stating off in his post. And so like, yeah, I'm like, you know what? Since this is the opportunity, like it's like the universe is probably telling me something. This must be the opportunity to announce. And so right there in the reply to Vitalik, I announced like our project, the white paper. And so like that was actually the first moment where I announced that I'm working on the new project, prediction market and all that. So like that's a bit of lore in there. And so from then on, like obviously we moved on to implementing an app. We had a beta app live for a little bit. We sort of wound that down to focus on getting a full feature implementation live. And then we had a Patreon sale going initially. We paused that and we sort of relaunched it actually just on a Monday, right? So we relaunched it on Monday, and I expected it was set to run for 2 weeks to 3 weeks. And I was thinking, that was it might even be conservative, because people are generally kind of slow to move these things by the time they have to do their due diligence and stuff, and they look into it. And so it wasn't. So I had no expectation that it would sell out in the first week, and much less in the first 24 hours. And so when I woke up, I just couldn't understand why. And I looked, and that was when I saw that Vitalik had jumped in. And so that was how I learned about it too, which was very pleasant, interesting. It was a very humbling moment for me because Vitalik is my idol. I sort of look up to him like in every way, and so to see that kind of validation of the project I worked on, it was just like, yeah, I was euphoric for a minute.
Man, that is an amazing validation. Honestly, you definitely should be. I don't think many founders get this honor and that fiercely and that quickly. So I think much respect, and I think that if someone like Vitalik sees what you're trying to build as that important, that he's willing to put that. That without even like personally knowing you and like being I don't know, a seed investor and all that stuff, I just find it to be remarkable and much respect, and very curious to see where you guys are going to take it from here. And by the way, it was it was Vitalik that minted all these 400 NFTs or something like that together, and then everyone else just aped in.
So actually, to our credit, like our sale was doing actually quite good before Vitalik went in. So like on the first day, we were about like 20% already sold by that point. Like when I went to sleep that night. So like before I went to sleep, we were about 20% sold on the sale. There was a few large wallets that participated. It was just like it looked like the interest for it was a lot. There was a lot of appetite. I guess like the price action since like all the overall crypto market since we last had the patron sale live had just improved. The sentiment had improved so much since then. Maybe not like to the ETH and DeFi ecosystem specifically, but like more broadly, like Bitcoin is, when we first launched it, it was like around 70K. Today it's near 100K. On the weekend it was like 90K. So like it was just like there's a huge difference in sentiment overall in the market as well. So the sale was actually doing quite good. I'm not exactly sure what it was at before Vitalik sort of participated, but it was actually like the turnout was we were very happy with what we were seeing so far. Like and so like we were the first time we launched the patron sale, it was sort of like a bit of a disappointment. Didn't really have a lot of turnout, but also our like go to market for it wasn't that great. We weren't very we didn't really have a huge presence. Like our project wasn't known. It would have taken quite a bit of time to sort of get that rolling and like get some awareness going, and like the NFT itself that we had initially, it wasn't the art part particularly wasn't like that compelling, and so we just decided to like stop the sale, reassess it, and like redesign that like the art to make the art itself just like really nice. We also like increased the collection size. Before we had it like almost like a pass type of like it was a pass type of NFT. Versus like some kind of image or like art type NFT, and so like we had actually like had the supply of NFTs like set out that way. So like with a pass, normally you have like 1,000, 2,000, or like up to 5,000 passes. In this case, we decided that like we had 5,000 original NFTs. Where like that amount is also like it creates too high of a bar for someone to participate. So we lowered it so that like anyone who just likes the art can buy it also just for the art. And that would just get us a lot of individual users that just like come in and sort of like mint one, and that also gives them a sense to like raise awareness about the sale. So we approached it like in a lot of different ways. And it turned out like it was we were seeing a good response from it initially. So yeah, before Vitalik participated, like it was already like all signs were showing that like it was just a lot better. There was a lot more appetite. There was a decent interest, and then after he went in, like it just, it sort of took off.
Yeah, yeah. I think that what you did is you made an app based on a blog that he wrote. So Vitalik had previously invested into Polymarket back in May when they had done their Series B. It was unclear how much he put in at the time. But they raised 45 million in that round, and around that time, just earlier this year in November, like almost a week ago, he wrote this article about prediction markets. Let me bring this up. I don't know if you've seen this, Millie, but it's called From Prediction Markets to Info Finance, and it talks about how prediction markets are a really powerful way to convey news and information to like the broader, to pretty much everybody, right? Because when there's money involved, it allows for like finance to take over and figure out like what the right probabilities are. So obviously we saw this in the changing election odds for the most recent U.S. election, but really this can be applied to pretty much anything, right? So Vitalik says that prediction markets are only one example of a much larger, incredibly powerful category with the potential to create better implementations of social media, science, news, governance, and other fields. And he calls this info finance.
Yeah, I saw I read the article right when he posted it, and right away I sort of posted like, this is exactly what we're working on, because it literally is like, these are the exact things that we're like, this is like basically the pillars of what we're trying to build towards. I think like he's actually, this isn't his first blog post about it. He's wrote many about it. I think like it must have, rubbed off on me very much in the earlier days when I sort of read some of his work. And so like, actually, since my sort of experience with like prediction markets and sort of binary options, it's just like, it actually goes back to like my very, very first interactions with DeFi. When I originally found DeFi, like, and I sort of found the synthetics ecosystem, at the time they had this new product that they had just launched, and it was called binary options. And it was just like simple binary options where you could trade, once, basically just like a prediction market with like a price feed that sort of resolves it at some date. Exact same setup. And they had, I believe it was Chainlink that was sort of resolving these for them. And so like, it was from that time, like my experience with these things was just like, I found them really fascinating, interesting. And, like it was just clear that like, these things, they're just limited by like what you can list, like what asset you can list, what like price feeds your Oracle could support. And so like in those cases, like, these were binary options for like just any kind of asset to mature at like some price, so that whether it trades at like a certain price at maturity. And so like they're very basic and very simple. But like at the time, I was just like very curious about like how you could convert that into like more like something more like an event, or something more subjective, something like a more like a real world outcome, or something like a headline. And so like these ideas were sort of really early back then. I think Vitalik had already talked about that, and they're sort of like seeded in my mind. I just didn't know how to reason about like how you could do this. And then we fast forward like in 2022, I worked with a small team to build an app. Like it was a prediction market, and it was very decentralized design, like prediction market design. But we sort of worked on it then, and it was in the depths of the bear market, and it was just like really, really like a tough time to like for prediction markets. There just wasn't a lot of awareness for them. People weren't that interested in them. They're fundamentally harder to provide liquidity to, so it was hard to get liquidity. I think like for the lifetime of that app, we had like less than 10K liquidity at any given time, and so less than 10K TVL, and so like. Yeah, it just like there wasn't just a lot of interest. I know we were on Optimism at the time, like it didn't have like it had like a little bit of rocky launch. It was still like very small. It didn't have like this whole super chain narrative going for it. And yeah, it was like this was summer 2022. So like this is like right after Luna and 3AC and everything. So like it was just like the market was dead. And so like that app, it had actually some constraints that wouldn't like limited like the ability to scale like that implementation. But what we did, like what we learned so much about it, and we just came to this conclusion that like if we want to like do this properly, there would need to be some very drastic changes and some like huge architectural changes to the app and the protocol underneath, and to the way like we go about like resolving markets, because we quickly realized like it all just comes down to the Oracle with prediction markets. Like that is like 99.9% of it, of the mechanism anyway. Excuse me. It's like 99.9% of the mechanism. The rest is all like sort of like more marketing and like distribution. But underneath, like the financial aspect of it, like the AMM or like how you trade these, there's really not much of an improvement to get there over like an order book. Any kind of like for any kind of construct. Like most of the mechanism design of like building a prediction market really just, in my opinion, comes down to the Oracle. And so like the thing about having a really good Oracle is that if you have a flexible Oracle, you can provide like much more like essentially quote unquote feeds or markets, right? Like you could support any kind of like token that just sprung up if you have an Oracle that is flexible to support it. So like even a tiny like microcap token, you can essentially create like a brand new meme coin You can create a prediction market for it. And the good thing about that is that you can like allow people to take a short side of something, right? Because taking the short side of like of a low cap is just like almost impossible. But on a prediction market, you do it very well with this model of like that we're going with. And so for us, it's really just a matter of like being able to support different assets. And the reason why I gave a meme coin example just there is because meme coins are like the longest of long tail. And excuse me, if you like, they're the one thing that like you can't provide other like financial instruments for. And so like, but prediction markets are sort of like perfect for the long tail. They sort of like deal with these really long tail type of markets that are based on real world events, based on like a subjective description and set of rules. And so like, it just like, those are inherently very long tail. And so the mechanism for it is just designed to work for the long tail. And so like, it just allows you to like support just a vast, like virtually anything, right? You can just virtually support any kind of market on our prediction market. And so that's why our end goal is to eventually offer like micro markets, where small markets are something like would have been like completely infeasible before, that nobody would have thought of like creating like a prediction market for, or some trading like something to express sentiment around, like an event, a fact. It could be like just think about anything that you could put like a wager on, you can make a prediction market for. And so like there's a lot of benefits to that. But Vitalik was like, one of the first to sort of write about this in his early writing about like how when you could leverage like a combination of prediction markets with community notes, to like with something like community notes, because I think when he first talked about it, it was before community notes had even spawned. Like this was community notes, just like was something recent that I think came with Elon or whatever, when he took over Twitter. But Vitalik had actually like written about similar constructs like very much earlier in his like in his career. And so like these things sort of all like stayed with me, and like this is really what we're trying to build towards, like this idea of allowing like putting, it's like imagine some fact or some event that just so small that to the overall like most people, it just, the cost of going to like finding out if something is true, if like some stated fact or something content on the internet is like true or not, it just is too much work for them, right? So they're just going to look at it and glance at it and just keep scrolling. Maybe that like they take whatever statement is there in that like piece of content like for fact. Maybe they don't. Maybe they dismiss it. But like either way, there's no like incentive for anybody to go break this down, because it's really easy to like spread misinformation. It's really easy to make statements. It's very expensive to go and like dispel those statements, to like fact check them and to get to the truth about it. That is what's very costly. And so one really cool benefit of prediction markets at scale, when you can offer like micro markets, is you create a bounty and incentive to sort of come to like essentially the truth about that fact or event. This is when you resolve it, but also in real time, you're incentivizing people to express some sentiment about the factuality of whatever like this market is, right? Like, is this market true or not? Yes or no? And like, no matter how small it is, there's some incentive there for somebody to come and correct this market and display like odds that represent the truth. And so like, if it's something very small, it might not be very trivial. It might not cost a lot to like go find out if the fact is true or not, but there is some cost associated. But once you create this incentive for someone to go and solve that and look and research and see like, is this fact true? Is this statement true? Is this content AI generated or not? Is like or whatever, right? Like you just think about like a community notes feature with like a prediction market attached, and so like anybody could just like has this small incentive to come here and like permissionlessly just like express what they think with their skin in the game, with their money online, what they think that the truth is about that fact statement, market, whatever. And so like this is really like, it's a powerful thing, because now when you have this tool, this unbiased way of like essentially distilling the truth about like random anything that could be put out on the internet online, like now you have like this, it's like a new unlock, right, of a way of like getting very unbiased market driven data from like pretty much anything that you're interested in. And like what we really want to do is like, and we think like the end game for this is to like have a way to allow people to make markets permissionlessly, where it allows you to essentially put a bounty on anything permissionlessly, anything that is within the scope of what our Oracle could support, which is supposed to be like very flexible. And you'd be able to like create markets for around events, around facts, around basically virtually like anything that we could support. And so like I think like a lot of this has been stuff that it was talked about a lot for many years, and prediction markets themselves have actually been around for centuries, right? They're not new. They've been around for a long time, but they really have never taken off before, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of the main reasons is that they need like really open, unfiltered access to function properly. They actually really benefit from censorship resistance, from open access, from permissionless access to liquidity, from permissionlessly viewing and trading these markets. It's like in history, like anytime the prediction market would spin up, like it would get shut down really quickly, it would get targeted, something like that would happen. But now that we have blockchains, these apps don't just shut down. It's not, you can't just shut them down. They're not located in one place. They're difficult to shut down. And even if you could, the important thing is that like users have like this self-custodial, like they have this self-custodial ability where their funds aren't at risk. So it allows them to like say, okay, you know what, even if like there is some risk that the app might not like pan out, we at least know that our funds are always, self-custodially held. We could always withdraw it. That allows people to like have greater trust in like participating in these markets and allow them to function at scale. And then the last thing was that like Polymarket was actually live in like 2020, and prediction markets have been operating for elections for a long time, but they never really took off that big until like crypto, and they didn't particularly take off until the very first election we had in like the era of scalable blockchains. Because in 2020, Polymarket sort of like, we had ETH mainnet, and then we had like Polygon Plasma or whatever, or it wasn't Polygon at the time, it was like Matic, and there was like a Plasma bridge, and like there wasn't really good tooling for it. It was just like, it wasn't this like the same as how like seamless the UX for rollups are today. Like people complain about rollups today, like they have no idea what like any of these side chains and rollups were like in 2020. And so like in 2020, there was just no room for Polymarket to get that big. But now, like I think what we saw with the election, this was the ultimate, like in the history of prediction markets, this was like the biggest ultimate stress test and validation moment for what they this theory and this thesis that I sort of laid out about being like this unbiased news source. For the first time, this sort of like proved out at scale, because all of the polls across like the major polling firms in the U.S., all of them essentially were indicating like a neck and neck tie, right? A dead heat tie between the two candidates, whereas Polymarket was clearly siding with one candidate, and it was clearly indicating that one candidate had a stronger lead and had this sustained sort of indication throughout basically the whole like lead up to the election, right? And even on the very day of, it was 60-40 in one direction versus the other. And so like like on that morning of like the day of the election, it was by far the most accurate like a predictor of what the outcome would be. And then as the sort of the day started to go by the time like it was like evening time, Polymarket was already like showing 95% for essentially a Trump victory, versus like the traditional news desks. They were like, and there's a good reason why traditional news desks would want to be cautious about how they sort of announce sort of how they go about declaring victory for one side or another in any state. But like they were just like so behind, right? Whereas Polymarket was like trading at 95% essentially likelihood for one candidate, versus like these traditional news desks that were basically they were like it's still showing dead heat, right? It was a toss up essentially, what they were saying. And so like I think all this is to say is that like this is like a really, really crucial moment for prediction markets, where they're really just now possible. Like there was no appetite for them before. The teams that were sort of trying to do it, like there were a lot of different mechanisms that came out that weren't that great. Like Augur, sort of like the mechanism itself had these like fundamental limitations, in my opinion, that sort of never allowed people to get comfortable with it. Polymarket had like a different approach. They sort of really focused on user experience, which really worked out for them. And I sort of give them a lot of credit for that, because the market would not be where it is today if it wasn't for them. Like the appetite for prediction markets would not be where it is if it wasn't for them. The pie, the amount of attention that prediction markets get in general just would be so much less if it wasn't for they're like the amazing work they put in like the past several years to like build up their platform. And so they just grew the pie like significantly and gave an opportunity to like any prediction markets that sort of to come in and sort of also compete and exist. And like we might be competitors at some level, but like I really just like there's no world where like Polymarket doesn't do good and like all other prediction markets do well. It's just like I really think like Polymarket doing well is just like good for the rest of like the sector. And so like we're really approaching it from that perspective. And like the other thing is that realistically, like everyone says a lot of prediction markets, but there actually aren't that many, right? Like I think people like people are like, yeah, a lot of people are sort of launching prediction markets in the hype of like the election and all that. And for us, we sort of part of the reason we wound down the prediction market was because like we didn't want to compete with that hype, and we didn't think that it was just a hype moment. We think it's like a long-term moment, and so we were perfectly comfortable with like just waiting out the election and sort of like just like going to market in a different way. And all this to say that I think Vitalik also noticed like this is a very crucial moment for prediction markets, and like there is a huge opportunity. Like despite people thinking that like that it might be oversaturated right now, if you go look on like DeFi Llama, for example, like the top prediction markets, like there's Poly Market, and then there's like really nothing else. Number two, like just like nothing. Like it's completely in a league of its own. I think Gnosis is like the other prediction market that's sort of like close to second. There's another betting site that's sort of labeled there as a prediction market, but
what's more Kalshi? There's stuff they called Kalshi or something.
Yeah.
Kalshi is Web 2 legacy, yeah. But just like in like Web 3, there's not really any competition with the Poly market. And as for Kalshi and like the Web 2 legacy prediction, I really just don't think they'll ever compete in the long term with Web 3 prediction markets. Like when I just think about the mechanisms that prediction markets, like they just will never like be able to compete with what we offer or what Poly market offers, or even with like another prediction market. I just don't think like they will. They have a good distribution, and they could probably live off that for a while. But I don't think significantly they're like a competitive force with us. Like I wouldn't look at them that way. And like it depends how big this sector gets. So like if what I think is true, and I think this sector is going to grow like by orders of magnitude until next election. And so I think like if that plays out, then there'll just be a lot of incentive for other sort of Web 2 like Robinhood and stuff to get more deeper into prediction markets. But as they venture in, I know as someone who's building this, they're going to hit certain obstacles, and they're going to realize for them it's going to be very difficult to service these. It's very difficult to service micro markets. It might not even be feasible at first. It might like be a loss leader or something that like. And for Web 2 systems, they take on so much. There's so much counterparty risk for them because they're like it's all this custodial service, and it's just like they have so much more liability for that reason, and so like they just can't offer like anything. And because we have this decentralized dispute resolution system, it's like we could offer a lot more markets that they can.
Well, before we get there, I think it's just groundbreaking the distribution of the information that we glean from these prediction markets. It's become like widespread in the course of 1 year, where
even a few months,
not just like the U.S. election, but I think going forward, this info finance or whatever you want to call it, that's how Vitalik called it. It's really going to be front and center at pretty much every news event that's going to happen. I was just looking on like Zero Hedge today, and after the Ukrainians or after the Russians launched an ICBM last night, there's now like prediction markets for like, will a nuclear weapon detonate in 2024, or is there going to be like nukes in space or something? Like it's just wild. And I think that there's just I think the closest analogy that I can see is how quickly sports betting has overtaken or like integrated itself into just every single part of professional sports now, where 15, 20 years ago it was anathema or just or something that would get you blacklisted for even suggesting that we should allow like gambling to be promoted through professional sports. But now you turn the TV and everything is just pushing viewers on those events to like, oh, here's the live prediction odds. Oh, here's the spread. Like, this is what the gamblers are thinking. It's become so ubiquitous inside of these events that it's just impossible to like imagine these types of events happening without having this like financial layer built on top. And that's where we're heading with these prediction markets. And I think you're ahead of the game here, Millie.
Yeah, I think that was a perfect way to frame it. Like, that's exactly what we see. And a lot of like the partners that we're talking to about sort of like collaborating on this front, where like news desks and stuff, they sort of see it through the exact same lens. They see a future where like every news article, every sort of like important piece of information headline is accompanied with some underlying prediction market with it. And so I think it's all about like, and I honestly think in this whole realm of media, I think like Web3, this is the next frontier of like, we had DeFi before this, we had, L1s before this, like moneyness, like Bitcoin. Then we had DeFi in the last cycle and NFTs. Like we found everything about the financial layer. Like we're getting really efficient with that side of things. I think the next frontier is like the media, decentralized social media and like decentralized media in general. It just has this like, the benefit of decentralized media is that it's fundamentally less biased. If you do it properly, it'll fundamentally have less bias. And I think like at the heart of that is going to be like prediction markets. But I also think like social media like is going to tie into that heavily. And actually, I think what we're seeing right now is very subtle, but there's a migration for Web2 socials to a version of a Web3 sort of hybrid. And we kind of see this with Twitter right now. Like it's very centralized, but they are drawing a lot of inspiration from like stuff from Web3, like this, like community notes, like open sourcing the algorithm. I think in the future, if I'm not mistaken, they're probably going to start like integrating things like Polymarket. They're going to like, in order to service these things, their users are probably going to demand like a different type. It's going to change. The philosophy of user will change, and it'll change from just being like doom scrolling. They might want more, right? Like more like accurate information. This will maybe spur them to adopt more decentralized philosophies that sort of like align with that. And it's a very slow transition, but I could see the early stages of it. And I think like that's really the direction.
We're already seeing it on Farcaster, right? Like I believe that some of Polymarket's markets could be added as what's the app thing called on Farcaster?
Frames.
Like the frames. Yeah, you could add the Polymarket as a frame. It's not too far to think that like X or one of the other social media companies would add that at scale, especially for like some events. I mean, especially for sport. Like I would see that like sports betting would be the first thing. Like it would just make sense for X to integrate sports betting into like having the lines or being able to take the bet like through the app. They could get a cut and then they could facilitate transfers or something. I'm sure it'd be a huge revenue boost.
Yeah, and also, I think you're just on point. Like there are so many, like X already has the people, for example, over there. So basically, if it knows how to integrate stuff, it can actually, in a way, become like Elon's original vision, from what I've heard, of having X as the everything app.
Actually, I think he's going towards it. Like, didn't he just recently release like NFL highlights on X? Like, you could full NFL.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, he's going for something like that we don't really realize, and I do think that a lot of the stuff that people are building can, in a way, fit in and actually benefit from it at some point. And prediction market is for sure. Guys, did you even see how like mainstream it got? Like, look, we're talking about the biggest event in the world, basically, the U.S. election. Polymarket was the only one to say it like correctly. While everyone, like, it completely obliterated the whole point of like surveys. Like surveys are gone. Like if you want actual data, you need prediction markets. It's 10 times more reliable.
I mean, but we're not talking that much of a difference, right? I think like up until
what? 50 to 50 to 60 to 40? It's a huge difference.
Well, I mean, like they do integrate surveys, like prediction market, like anyone who's participating, the average participant, the disparate group of market participants that are trading these markets, they are certainly taking in the survey data and they're like factoring into their decisions. So what it does is adds a layer of filter to filter out the noise of like who like just like is spewing stuff, is saying stuff that's not true, like all the bias that we see from like CNN and Fox, like they both have like just a partisan bias, and so like that comes through in all of their essentially like any kind of content they put out just comes through. It's like it's impossible not to notice it. And so like that's why their trust for them is sort of at an all-time low. But like a lot of like the methodology that goes into it, like polling and stuff, like there's a way to do it that you get good estimates. But what a prediction market does, it creates this incentive for whoever has the best estimate to essentially go and express that for a financial gain. And so like if you have really, and this is exactly what we saw play out with Polymarket, this huge French whale trader was looking at the data and he was just saying this doesn't add up. That it looks like some of his data is off. On top of that, he did his own like on the ground surveys and sort of his own polling, and he saw that like the numbers just don't match. Like they're just lopsided to one side, like significantly. And so to him it was a very conservative bet. Even like it wasn't even a huge gamble. It's so much so that he even took the popular vote for Trump. That's how confident he was, and he ended up being right on that. And Polymarket, that was the one market where Polymarket was showing was actually it turned out to be incorrect on, and leading in on the day of election, because it was showing the Democrats.
It was quite high. It was like in the 80s or 90s, right? Like
yeah.
I think that one was quite high. I think the thing that is most interesting for me is the ability to scale these markets downwards. And I think you mentioned this earlier, and this was also brought up by Vitalik in that article that I shared. He calls them mini markets for decisions that have like relatively low consequences. Like the Trump election is like a very high consequence, high betting market, high liquidity, billions of dollars of trading volume, and it attracts market makers. It attracts all sorts of these like large parties, small parties. Everybody wants to take a view on it. And it becomes like one of the defining markets of a generation. But how do you scale this into having like millions of these mini markets where it's low consequence, and the outcomes just are not presidential elections?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a few ways you got to go about it, and there are like it's not like super easy either. There's a lot of nuance to it. So to offer micro markets at scale, first of all, you have to be able to resolve those markets. So you have to have some system that is able to resolve micro markets and designed for that. And then on top of that, you need to have a few things. You need to have something like a cap on the market size, the open interest it can get, because a mini market, if it gets too big, and this is something I call the self-fulfilling prophecy phenomenon of like the self-fulfilling market phenomenon for prediction markets. And it's when a market can get so big that it can affect the outcome of the underlying event just by the nature of its existence. And so like an example of that would be like if you think about like a very small scale like amateur boxing match, if there all of a sudden there's a prediction market for and the open interest on that gets to several million, there's the amateurs. These are guys who are like, they're just like a regular average person, living a very simple life. And they look at this huge bounty and might incentivize you to throw in the fight or whatever, and take the other side of the trade. And this could be applied to anything, right? Like anything where the market gets too big, such that the people that are close to the event are incentivized to now like try to throw the event or influence it in one way or another. I think like that is, you want to avoid that, because that sort of, it takes away from the effect of like getting unfiltered signal. It sort of it dilutes it. You get manipulation, and so it's not desirable. And so like there has to be, and this is actually like in our market creation guidelines, like markets that are created, they have to have a discretionary cap if the existence of it could influence an outcome. And so like for micro markets, something very small, you sort of do need this cap for markets, and so that like they stay limited to a certain size. And this is something that like it's very subjective, but it's as you go, you sort of like play around with it and you figure out what is a sweet spot. For certain stuff, it's easier to like let the market get bigger. Stuff like that isn't event based. Stuff like, is this fact true or not? Like something like a fact based market, that you could essentially probably let it go pretty big, because at the end of the day, to disprove a fact, the bigger the bounty gets, like the better. So like there is like, it really just depends on the exact circumstance, and like it's very non-trivial. And so this is why I really think like I really feel like it's at the heart of like a prediction market to be able to scale it. It just comes down to the oracle at the end of the day. That's why we sort of put that in the center of our project.
So like, how do you in these, like, let's say you have millions of micro markets, like where does all that oracle data come from?
So what you would need to get to that scale is you need AI agents. And so this wasn't actually possible back in 2022. It's one of those things that's sort of like a white swan that sort of, again, like enables prediction markets in like a really novel way, at like the bleeding edge of like AI and LLMs and these different models are being developed. And so like it's really like when you have an AI agent that could essentially monitor all these like thousands of markets in real time and just monitor real world events for them, and like real world, like essentially when you create a market, you need to like program some sources into it that it would be resolved based off of. And like the AI agent would essentially monitor all these sources, and they would resolve the market at any time in real time as soon as it's ready, or they would dispute resolutions that sort of are faulty or malicious in real time. And this is something that a human just can't do. You can't have, no matter how big your team is, you cannot track like thousands and thousands of markets for small little events. It's not economical to do so. Even if you wanted to and you could do it, it's just not economical. And so like this is the only reason why it works now. And like when you have AI, just the beauty is that like once you have an escalation system built in, like how we do, you can really give the AI agents like a lot of autonomy, right? And you can allow them to just like operate freely and resolve markets because all the resolutions are optimistic. Like any resolution they propose goes through a challenge window, and if it's not challenged or disputed, then it's resolved. So it's like any market that they resolve that seems to be faulty or they make a mistake, it's very trivial to challenge that and escalate it to a human coordination layer to essentially distill like what's happening. And so like this was just not possible before AI agents, and this is why it could actually work now. Like we could actually service these today.
Right. I kind of have I don't want to I don't want to be cringe and pull a terrible like use case out, but like it just got me thinking about like this like convergence of like DeepN, where you're trying to be able to have like digital understanding of physical objects mixed with AI agents, mixed with this resolution system that you guys have. I think, pardon me if I'm pulling out some cringe stuff out of my ass, but if you have like cocoa beans or something, which people always talk about, that get shipped from somewhere, I don't know, something that gets like you get an INF or like a QR code that gets slapped on it. You're able to verify the authenticity as it goes through some sort of like trade system. And these markets can essentially act as like resolvers, because the prediction market is like, oh, is it going to like arrive intact or something, right? Like this I could see as some sort of like micro market, right?
You mean like shipments from like people who importing, exporting? That kind of stuff?
I have no idea. I'm just saying, like, let's say something needs to move from one place.
I think you think of like insurance-like markets, right? Like almost like insurance.
But that is a prediction market, right? Insurance is like quasi prediction market, right?
Wow, interesting. I've never thought about it. Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like insurance is a quasi prediction market that, like, in most cases, it's going to arrive, but in there is this like small probability, which you can model in the market that it's not going to arrive. So like, prediction markets are like insurance companies are essentially picking up.
They need insurance companies need prediction markets in a way, you say.
Yeah, I mean it's like, if you want to like turn it into financial terms, insurance companies are just like selling specific types of like options on different outcomes, and the same for prediction markets as well too, right? It's like a quasi option market. And so you can take the same type of financialization from those markets, from the options markets, and apply it to both the prediction markets and insurance markets. Obviously, they have like different outcomes and resolutions that they're working towards, but they're all kind of like in the same like type of overall financial like structuring of how you're looking at future events.
Yeah, for sure. Very much so. So like prediction markets could very much be used as an insurance instrument. It could very much be repurposed for that, and it works very well for that actually. If you think about it, like because the nature of how flexible you could offer prediction markets, like by nature you could essentially turn them into insurance markets for almost anything, right? Because they're just so diverse and how you could offer and also they're peer-to-peer, right? So they're like peer-to-peer insurance markets where it's like, your counterparty is somebody that wants to take the other side of the trade, right? And so it's like it's very scalable in that nature too, because prediction like insurance companies, they have this one problem where it's like if they ever have a big disaster that sort of wipes them out, they could go bankrupt, right? Like one big disaster. Like this is like accidental risk for every prediction market. Every insurance company. And so like it's always like the idea that like they're just too big to fail, or like they'll always have someone to backstop and step in, and then blah blah blah. And so like, but realistically, they don't really encounter these too much, except for like when there's big natural disasters or stuff, or like or events that sort of really take a hit on their bottom line. But they're not like, these events could be existential. They can't. There's no guarantee that they make it out of some of these. And so like when it's a peer-to-peer system, whoever's taking the other side of a trade, if you're using it as like an insurance instrument, you're essentially, the market will live on regardless. The actual market will never suffer from an insolvency. It'll just be, traders on the other side, the counterparties that would just lose based on their wrong sentiment. And so like, it's really just like it scales so much bigger than any kind of insurance market ever could. So this is why, like, if you use prediction market as like an insurance instrument, you definitely could, and you could do it in like very diverse ways that you could never ever do with any kind of traditional financial instrument.
So, like, getting rid of all the real world IRL types of markets, because I think people have talked about those at length for the entirety of the time that I've known about Ethereum, but very few have actually come about. How does this get applied on chain, and what are some of the things that, like, overall in kind of a very expansive and broad scope, could you see this type of resolution system being applied to? Obviously, we've talked about prediction markets, but is there anything else that this like tiered resolution system that you have can be applied to on chain?
It could. You could use it for various like Futarchy applications. You could use it for dispute resolution within a governance setting. The thing is, where it comes down to is like, you really want, like, if it's something governance related, if you want to use it for Futarchy, if you want to use it to like resolve disputes between like counterparties that had some agreement, some contractual agreement, if you want to use it for those use cases, you really got to make sure that like the human coordination layer is suited to be able to manage like those resolutions, right? Because if you're like part of our Oracle system, a very critical part of it is that we have this ultimate human coordination layer that sort of like acts as a final juror, that acts like a jury pool for the Oracle and dispute resolution, and delivers a final verdict if they're ever like disputes are escalated to that level. And so that pool of jurors is something we call attesters, and they're all filtered for proof of reputation, and they have to be people that are in the industry, they have some reputation, they whether it's on-chain reputation in like governance and different protocols contributing, whether it's like a reputation of like being on like in OPSEC practices, like or having a really good expansive GitHub profile, contributing to a lot of open source projects, or if you're well known on Twitter, or if you're a founder in the space, or if you're any kind of prominent figure. And right now we sort of sticking to like crypto natives, because it's like this whole on-chain interaction requires some like ability to interact with like on-chain applications. But like we can eventually expand that out to like provably reputable people just like outside of crypto, like in the mainstream, and like I don't want to say normies, but like normies outside of the industry. And so like anyone who's provably reputable could essentially be an attester. And so the idea is that like do you want that sort of really distributed, unbiased sort of like pool of people resolving whatever your dispute is, whether it's like a governance dispute or if it's like a futarchy market. For something like a futarchy, it would probably make a lot more sense. For something like a governance dispute, you wouldn't want like this huge pool of people like potentially like at random being selected to resolve it. And so like you could take like pieces of like our Oracle system and apply parts of it and not all of it to your to like a dedicated solution. But one thing that we're doing is we're not really trying to be like a general purpose Oracle system. We're more trying to just like focus on application specific use cases of our Oracle within our own applications that we're building. And so right now, the first one is a prediction market. And yeah, we might expand that to other stuff later. But for now, we really just think like this is like the place to really make the most inroads. And like we realized like a lot of the application ideas we had sort of all just fit really well within a prediction market in general. And so like, even futarchy is basically like a prediction market for it's a prediction market, right? It's using prediction market to make decisions. So like it really works well in that capacity. There are other ways it can be used, but like we haven't really explored that area. But this system is actually like, and shout out to like other projects that are trying to like Claros and stuff where like they have this sort of tiered escalation system to resolve matters. It definitely could be applied in different ways, and they are doing it. For us, we just want a very specific spec, a very specific mechanism to resolve like what we want out of our application, and that's why we went about the sort of mechanism that we had. It was like a very application specific implementation, and we're calling it like Truth Oracle, where it's like this has like this decentralized jury pool that I explained, sort of like acting as the final backstop. And in between that, there's many layers, not many layers, two other layers. There's like a council layer, and there's also like a token holder layer, token staker layer that sort of also provides some signal to what the outcome could be. And it just like progressing through this is just like a bond escalation system where you put up a bond, you escalate it to the higher authority. And so like this, in our opinion, like, it's very, for the reason we enshrined the Oracle is because we really feel like the Oracle and the application really have to be tied in together. And we actually see this actually consistent across with perpetual exchanges as well. Like if you notice, perp dexes like Synthetics and GMX that are sort of Oracle based, they're really limited to what assets they can add, like based on what Oracle, what their Oracle supports, right? Whatever price feeds their Oracle supports, those are the only ones that can integrate. Whereas if you look at something like a more like a Hyperliquid or a DYDX, where they have an enshrined Oracle, the Oracle's enshrined into like the protocol, into the consensus. In those systems, you see they have a lot more flexibility. They add a lot more markets. And in fact, you see with like a DYDX, they actually have permissionless markets now. And so like they have, it just like, this is a theme in Oracles that when you enshrine it, you just have a lot more flexibility in what you could offer and how you could tailor your solution to it. So I really think like the end game for a lot of Oracles is like an enshrined Oracle solution, at least not for like in these kind of applications. And it just like, it's consistent, and like we see it across the industry where if you have an enshrined Oracle, you just have this this extra functionality, extra flexibility, versatility, all that.
That's really, man, such a deep rabbit hole you've decided to get into, man, and much respect for that. Can you maybe share some stuff like roadmap stuff? What's coming up in the next few months now after you had such a great sale? Like, what should the audience expect, and where should people follow you guys and try to get involved if they can?
Yeah, definitely. So now that our patient sales wrapped up, we're going to be starting to announce like our testers, and like our tester NFTs are sort of completed. They've already been sent out. I know both of you guys are testers as well in our Oracle, and so those have been sent out. We just haven't announced it. The OpenSea currently hides the NFT. Like if you look in your wallet, you won't see it on OpenSea. So we're working to get that fixed. But the very next test for our project is to like get our full feature app live and with the token. And at that point, that's when the roadmap really starts. We really like see an end game for this. Like everything I've talked about today is like what we see for the end game of it. But there's a progression to get there, and it really starts with like being able to offer permissionless markets. And once you can offer permissionless markets, now even for very specific events, like specific categories, now you can just really scale that system and test it, stress test, and see like where it works, where it doesn't at scale. And that's like the foundation of how we're going to eventually scale this to offer micro markets, fact check markets, and then at the end, we really think the very, very end game of all this is having some sort of ability to aggregate content from all over the internet and sort of like permissionlessly like create markets for these events. And so like having agents that sort of like aggregate events all around the world, like news sources, social media, everywhere, and it could just like generate prediction markets for anything essentially. And then all you need is like a system of like ability to like boost or like deboost markets that make sense or markets that don't make sense, sort of filter out which ones like are more interesting versus not interesting. And like once we, all these things are sort of like in the pipeline of what we're sort of planning. And like there's a lot of like crafty ways of how we can go do it, which includes like, how the token ties into the protocol. You could allow like token holders to sort of boost markets that they think are interesting, and they, that would boost the market. You could even allow them to incentivize, vote to incentivize a market, similar to like how we see with Velodrome. And like prediction markets are very difficult to incentivize liquidity for. So like we have this approach of like very similar to Polymarket, where we incentivize liquidity just at the bid and ask, using like on-chain staking contracts. Allow people to like whoever provides liquidity, like to close that spread and to close that gap to earn some rewards. With prediction markets, unfortunately, you can never like go overboard with incentives because it's very difficult to provide liquidity to these things. So you can't like just like throw incentives at it and think it'll solve the problem. It just doesn't work that way. So it has to be very strategic about how you do this. And yeah, so like we're thinking about very crafty ways of how we could enable that. And I think like we have a pretty good idea of how we could offer, like this aggregation feature where you have an agent sort of aggregating markets from everywhere, and sort of like posting it to some like timeline thing within our application, and users can sort of just like speculate on whatever like market they want. They can participate in them. They can just like read from it. They can just like get sentiment from it. They could there's a lot of ways, and you could also like make it a very interactive experience as well. Which is why I really feel like prediction markets, social media, and like media in general just like tie in together really closely. And so like this is really the far out end game we see. And in the meanwhile, we really just want to like hone out like our prediction market app and like make sure that is like very like just bulletproof and works well, and like stress test our Oracle system. And so that way we're well positioned for the next election as well, because this election was a huge event. It was the biggest event for prediction markets ever. And I think the next one is going to be even bigger, significantly bigger. I have a feeling it'll be at least an order of magnitude bigger. And so, yeah, I just think like we really want to be positioned for that as well. And so like this is sort of like what I see for us going forward.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Millie. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to attesting to some disputed decisions with TrueMarkets in the coming weeks. If anybody hasn't checked it out, you can go to truemarkets.org and check out the website. It looks great. Plus, you can see the results of the patron NFT sale. And you can follow Millie on X at llamaonthebrink. And you can also find myself and DA on X as well too. Make sure to subscribe to Leviathan News on Telegram as well as X as well. Telegram is where all the juicy stuff is. You can come and join the Squid Cave.
Whatever. Yeah, Squid Cave. You're right. We should start sharing the Squid Cave link more.
Yeah. And you can earn some squid for providing news. So thanks so much for being here, and we will see you tomorrow. I believe that Garrett's going to have his show. Not sure who it's with, but
there's also a chance that I will have another stream in a few hours, but I'm not sure yet. If so, I will let everyone know. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Quite an honor. Follow us wherever, of course, and follow Millie, Llama on the Brink, and TrueMarkets. And much respect, Millie. Good luck with the new project. Amazing to watch you from the side, like doing it, man. Honestly, much respect. Wish you a lot of luck.
Honestly,
Amazing.
Thank you guys so much. You guys have always been supportive. You're too kind.
Awesome. Thanks, Millie.
Bye-bye.
Bye, folks.